Next up we have Death Sentence from 2007. Kevin Bacon stars as a grieving father who decides to take the law into his own hands when his son is senselessly murdered by a gang member. He goes out and kills the young man responsible for his son's death, which leads to the entire gang waging a war on him and his family, and I guess without giving much else away in the movie, a lot of carnage ensues. So this is a movie that I really love. I think Kevin Bacon does a really fantastic job in it, especially for somewhat of a smaller production than some of the other movies that he tends to be in. You know, he could have just cashed in this performance, I guess, and I think he actually goes to great lengths to make it a very good movie. There's some awesome action sequences and plenty of thrilling moments throughout the movie. Possibly the biggest standout is the musical score. I think it was by Charlie Clouser, if I pronounce his name correctly. I believe it was from Nine Inch Nails. So yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite soundtracks and really helps to, or I think it really helps to elevate the emotional moments during the movie. It's just an enjoyable movie all the way from start to finish for me. I believe you've only just seen this for the first time, so I'm eager to see what you thought of this one.
Yeah, so this is a movie I've known about for a while, but I generally don't go out of my way to watch non-horror movies unless I really, really want to see them, and Death Sentence to me sounded like it could be a pretty good movie, but at the same time it wasn't something, it was like, oh, I've got to see this. When I was watching it, I enjoyed quite a bit of it. Some things seemed a bit off to me. I'm not sure if maybe it's just the way I watched it, but some of the lighting seemed iffy, some of the cinematography seemed almost amateurish. And since this is by the same guy who directed, a few of the Saw movies, I was somewhat surprised. I was also hoping for just a bit more violence in what we got. I mean, it certainly wasn't overly disappointing, but I don't know, I was expecting a little more carnage than just, a lot of the stuff that happened in the last 25 minutes. In many ways, it's quite a depressing movie, and I'm not sure how much I enjoy being overly depressed when watching an action movie. I sort of enjoyed the realistic feel it went for, and the whole idea that, well, I mean, you can keep going after someone for a wrong they did, but then they'll just come after you and nothing's really going to change. That's it's an interesting idea. And I enjoy the movie. I'm just not sure how much I actually loved the movie. I do have to say though, John Goldman was probably the highlight for me. I mean, I did like Kevin Bacon, don't get me wrong, but John Goldman's very enjoyable actor in my opinion, and especially the sequence when he's showing Kevin Bacon the firearms he has. I think it's quite a bit of fun.
You love your John Goodman. I guess one thing we should touch on is, you said you watched the unrated.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and I think back more or less around the time that this got released, it seemed like almost every movie that came out on DVD always got the unrated treatment. Like it always had like an extra 2-3 minutes thrown in. It was almost like there was a formula that all the studios were going for. Now for this one, it actually changes the ending to some extent. Very subtle change. I guess I can tell you what the change is, at least for the ending. There are other scenes in the movie, and more scenes featuring John Goodman in the extended version.
I will say, if you do have to spare any listeners from potentially being spoiled, I actually did read the differences between the rated and the unrated version.
So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, just tune us out for 30 seconds or so. So right at the end, the theatrical version shows Kevin Bacon on the couch watching the TV, and the unrated version kind of shows him kind of put his head down like he's died on the couch.
Dude, I'm surprised they made it home, to be honest. But
yeah, after being like shot in the neck and everything. I guess for me, I can still take that ending either way. I mean, but it does change things, I guess.
I mean, I'll be honest, even in the theatrical version, I just can't imagine a situation in which he is alive long enough to get, repaired up by the paramedics. I just don't see it. I think it was way too messed up, no matter how quick they, came for him.
Yeah, well, it's a movie. Ambulance will come up and be like, it's just a flesh wound.
I mean, I think either way, it's a very downbeat ending. I sort of like, I do like how they give sort of like a hope spot, hey, somebody's okay, or they could be okay. So it gives him sort of a reason to be happy, at least toward the end. But at the same time, that's amazing that he cast his family, just for what he did. No, it's pretty it's pretty depressing. I guess the question to me is, was he wrong?
Well,
I mean, no, I'm not a father to my knowledge, so it's obviously something I may not be able to say much about. But after the scene, and I don't think this is a spoiler, I'm pretty sure it's based on the movie. After seeing one of your sons killed in a gas station, I mean, I can sort of understand why, hey, I sort of have to go after this guy, especially if the justice system's only going to give him, I think it was 3 to 5 years. I mean, I'm not promoting vigilante action, I'm just talking.
Well, it's a tough thing. Like, I guess, like he says in the movie, you don't really know what you're capable of until you're in that situation. So another thing probably worth highlighting is that the lead, I guess you'd call him the lead bad guy in the movie. The bald guy with the tattoos and everything. If you've actually seen this guy in interviews before the movie, I think he was one of those teen heartthrob type guys, like with Pretty Boy.
I can see it.
And yeah, so it was very strange to see him in this kind of movie because I guess, he shaved his head, put on all these fake tattoos and whatever. They're pretty generic tattoos, to be honest, but I guess they, the effect is all that really matters.
Well, I guess the question is, do you expect gang members to get high-quality tattoos?
One thing that really bugs me, this isn't about the movie itself, but still don't have a good Blu-ray of this.
I'm actually somewhat surprised. But
yeah, I mean, it's not, to my knowledge, it's not out on Blu-ray in America. It's not out on Blu-ray in Australia. I've got a Blu-ray from the UK, but it could be so much better. It's a very bare bones release. It's not even in 1080p. I think it's in 1080i, which to some people, even in terms of presentations, probably lacking a little there as well. They need to get onto that.
I do have to say, when I was watching this, it did remind me of another movie I'd seen in the past. And not so much plot-wise, but some aspects of the story definitely rang familiar, being the 2005 movie History of Violence, which has a somewhat similar idea of a seemingly mild-mannered individual due to violence against his family turning into a very hardcore, vigilante type guy. So I definitely got some similar vibes from that. Now, Death Sentence is a much more violent movie, but I just wanted to point that out.
Well, some people say it's a loose remake of Death Wish.
I've actually never seen Death Wish.
Well, they ended up making 5 Death Wish movies. They just kept, making it sillier and sillier. But I believe it is this movie, which is actually based on a novel. I think it's based on the same novel as Death Wish. I'm not. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I hear or what I've heard. But once again, I don't read, so it really has no bearing on my opinion of the movie. And I'm sure you've never read the novel or anything, so
I suspect most people have never read a novel. I mean, God, I think Die Hard was based off a novel, so it's like so many movies, big movies that I'm almost positive 85% of the population has even heard of.
I mean, to what extent is a movie truly based on a novel, though? I mean, we get those movies that say they're based on true events.
Talk about something that pisses me off.
Yeah, so... But no, I'm sure this is probably at least a little closer to the novel than a movie that says it's based on true events.
Yeah, I just hope the novel's just a little happier than this, but I sort of doubt it.
Well, I mean, sometimes I like seeing a movie with a bit of a depressing ending. And actually, that's now, the third movie today I've thought of. We mentioned Prom Night, we mentioned Sweet 16. Both movies that kind of end, I think, on a depressing note and have a standout song play at the end. This is another movie that does the exact same thing. It's got quite a depressing ending as it rolls to the credits, with another standout song. At least for me, it was a standout song.
I was about to say I barely noticed this song, so I'm happy somebody did.
Okay. Whatever.
I will say, and this is probably just because we just spoke about this movie a few weeks ago, but the ending also reminded me a little bit of Drive too. Some guy sort of going out in a blaze of glory, which, I thought this was a pretty fantastic conclusion. Like the finale, last 15 minutes or so, was pretty much non-stop action, and I appreciated pretty much all of it, especially the shotgun blasts. Those were some good times.
Yeah, so a movie that I surprisingly loved when I first saw it, and still love to this day. I've watched it so many times. I think Kevin Bacon does really well in the movie. It has some really cool chase scenes, like the one chase scene, which actually has like 3 to 4 minutes of no cuts as they're running throughout a car park, and some people may not have picked up or noticed on that, but that would have been a very difficult scene to film. All in one take, I mean. It's got a really awesome soundtrack, which I think, as I said before, elevates a lot of the emotional scenes in the movie as they're dealing with the death of his son. And, like you said, it's a movie that ends quite depressingly with a song, for me, that it stands out for me. So I actually have this as one of my all-time favorite movies. I give it a 10 out of 10.
I think it's a decent movie. I think what the movie is going for is pretty interesting. I'm just not sure how much I enjoyed the movie aside from the violence the movie contained. There's some, a lot of interesting performances here. Like I said, John Goldman's performance here was pretty fantastic. Very different character than what I usually see him playing anyway. I would probably give this movie, it's definitely an above average movie, but I don't know if it's a movie that is like a fantastically above average movie. I'm probably leaning toward a 7.5, maybe rounded down to a 7, because it had a lot of good things in it, but it's just nothing I can see myself going back to anytime soon. Probably a lot more digestible than some other, recent action movies, but at the same time, it's just, I don't necessarily need all this bleakness in my life.
Coming from someone who watches people get stabbed on screen all the time.
There's a slight difference, thank you very much. But
Okay.